Hello friends, in the series which we are doing on the making of contemporary India 1950 to 1990s, we will talk about the Indian National Congress. And in the earlier part where we talked about the Indian National Congress, that how during the colonial rule, Congress as the premier party, where so many members of the Congress at the organizational level they were attached, and the leaders of the Congress, famous leaders, how all these famous leaders of the Congress, they played an important role during the national movement, and because of which Congress was known to the masses. And when the Congress entered the electoral politics, then it got benefited. It could reap the electoral benefits because Congress was a very well known party. We also discussed that how with the resolution which was moved by Patel, Sardar Patel, and how the members of the other political parties, how they were members of the Congress party as well, because they could be members of the Congress being the member of some other party, but it was discontinued after independence, and how many socialists, communists and other people, those who were associated with the Congress, they left the Congress during this time. And we also talked about the relations between Sardar Patel as well as Jawaharlal Nehru, and how they had their ideological as well as other kinds of differences in terms of policy making, but at the same time they equally had some kind of a mutual respect for each other, and they complemented each other, that how one of them was a great organizer, and on the other hand the other one had a good mass appeal. So because of which we find that both of them, they worked in tandem, and though they had these kind of differences between each other, but one thing which one has to realize is that how after the death of Gandhi in 1948, both of them, they realized that their cooperation with each other was very, very important, and both of them, they had frank discussions on any or every major government policy decision which was taken, and how Patel remained Nehru's loyal colleague, assuring him of complete support for his policies. And after Gandhi's death, Patel also describes him, Nehru, as his leader. On the other hand, Nehru also had the kind of respect for Patel, and he felt that Sardar Patel had been a tower of strength, and it was not possible without the affection and the advice for him to run the affairs of the state. And we find that when the Congress leadership had some kind of differences with the leadership of the government, that how J.B. Kripalani, he resigned on this issue, and later we find that Purushottam Das Tandon, who became the president of the Congress, as you can see on the screen as well, and there was some kind of a struggle for power between the right wing of the party, and Nehru came to a head in August 1950 over the question of the election of the party president, and this thing lasted for around a year. And Purushottam Das Tandon also felt that party president should be taken into confidence while the government is devising its policies. On the other hand, the other leaders, including Nehru, they were not in favor of such kind of a policy, and when the things came to such kind of a situation, that Nehru decided to take on Purushottam Das Tandon, and how during this time we find that many a times these kind of differences, they were also on the basis of the policy and the ideology, but at the same time we find that how the differences between Purushottam Das Tandon and Nehru, they were affecting the party organization as well. And we find that a large number of congressmen during this period, they were led by Kripalani, and they resigned from the party in June 1951, and they formed the Kisan Mazdoor Praja Party. So that way we find that such kind of splits from the party, they were not healthy from the point of view of the organization of the party as well. And Nehru and Purushottam Das Tandon, when they felt that they had these kind of divergent opinions with regard to the functioning of the government, where the Congress president wanted that he should be consulted, his outlook, his viewpoint, that has to be consulted. And then finally Nehru decided that whether the kind of idea which he had or the kind of idea which Purushottam Das Tandon had, any of them, it had to be supported by the party. And he in a way resigned from the working committee and the central election committee and asked the Congress members to decide regarding what is to be done. And in that context, Tandon also realized that the position of Nehru was comparatively more stronger than him, and realizing this situation, he himself resigned. And at that point of time, Nehru became the Congress president. Though earlier when he was invited to become the head of the government, he had resigned from the Congress party president because he did not want to hold both the posts. But at this point of time, he went back on his words and he became both the prime minister as well as the party president for some time. And we find that these kinds of differences within the party were also in a way healthy for the functioning of the government as well. But at the same time, one has to also realize that these kind of differences were not only from the framework of the policy matters, but because of the personal egos issues and the kind of conflict between the personalities as well. And we realize that when in this kind of a situation, when Tandon resigned, then it reflected the prominent role of the Prime Minister as well as the cabinet in formulation and carrying out of the policies of the government. And the party president was to focus on the organizational part of the Congress. But we also realized that the organizational part of the Congress was lagging behind, that how in the later times Nehru was not able to devote time to the party and was more focused on the government. So that was one of the criticism by some of the political scientists and historians, that the party decayed because of such kind of policy which was being followed. And when we talk about the role of the party in terms of formulating the policies and in terms of selecting the candidates for the state and the parliamentary elections, so party was definitely playing that important role. And when you tend to understand India, that how India is a huge country and so many people, they are illiterate, and how the party workers or the political workers, they definitely played an important role as links between the government and the people, and how they can convey the popular grievances to the government leaders and to explain the government policies to the people. So in a way, the people, those who are associated with the party, those who are not in the government, they will be able to maintain some kind of a link between the government and the people. They will be able to convey the policies which have been framed by the government are in the benefit of the people, and at the same time the mass opinion could also be communicated to the government leaders. So this way, because India definitely at that point of time when it became independent, it was largely illiterate and the people, and it was also very poor as well, because the drain of wealth from India, how the colonial rule exploited all the sectors of the economy. So economy was also in a very bad shape. And we find that how the implementation of the policies of the government and how some kind of a check on the bureaucracy could be kept by the people, those who are in the party. And for example, the implementation of the land reforms could have been achieved through an active and alive party. So land reforms were an important objective and consideration after independence, and we find that it could not be clinched in many of the states, and the way the land reforms they were being implemented, much was left to be desired, the way they were being implemented. And Congress party for that matter could have played an important role in terms of achieving those objectives. So we find that many a times that how the role of the party was important, and party definitely was important, and Nehru and his colleagues, as has been argued by Bipin Chandra as well, that they neglected the organization of the party and they failed to assign its cadre proper tasks, as also to give them their due honor and importance. Instead, there was certain devaluing and atrophying of party and party work. So one has to realize that the Congress was a dominant party. The legacy of the national movement was attached with the Congress, and Nehru himself, he realized the importance of the party, that the way party functioned during the colonial period, but his colleagues and himself, they in a way neglected the organization of the party, and the kind of tasks which could have been given to the cadres, so that the party remains in popularity and the party is able to make some kind of a connect with the population. These kind of things, they were not being done in a proper manner, and many a times as was found that how due honor and importance was not given to the cadres, those who were engaged in the party work, and the value which would have been given to the party and the party work was not given. Rather, they were being devalued, and more people, they were more concerned with becoming the part of the government, becoming ministers, etc., keeping the key posts, rather than in the organization of the party as well as the party work. So this was some kind of a limitation from this point of view, that how if the cadres, they would have been engaged in terms of making some kind of connect with the masses, and they could have continued in their own vein, in their own way. And similarly, the masses would have also felt much closer to the party over a period of time. But we see that this kind of a culture over a period of time cropped up, where the focus was more in terms of getting the ministerial berths. So that became some sort of a limitation for the party, and we find that whosoever was important in the party, they wanted that they should be in the ministry. And when it was felt that they could not remain in the ministry, then only they took to the party work. So it was a bad precedent which was set by the people, those who were attached with the Congress, without realizing that unless they devote a lot of time and energy to the party work, the party will not remain popular among the masses. So that was one of the shortcomings with regard to the people, those who were associated with the party, that how they only wanted to occupy the chairs of the ministers, etc. And scholar Myron Wiener talks about that there was increasing corruption, disillusionment and loss of elan in Congress party, and some sort of a patronage system was initiated in the rural areas, leading to the emergence of political brokers, middlemen and vote banks. So when one is talking about the corruption, disillusionment, that 1950s, 60s and thereafter, we find that people they felt some kind of disenchantment with the Congress, and in 1970s especially we find that this enchantment grew louder and louder, finally leading to the defeat of the Congress in the second half of the 1970s. So this kind of a situation could only be arrived because Congress had a great legacy of the national movement, and how the leaders, they could have taken up the reorganization or the functioning of the party in their own hands. But this kind of a stepmotherly treatment which was given to the party and the focus on the government, it led to some kind of a decay in the party organization, structure and functioning. And we also realized that how different kind of factions or the groups they became more dominant, and how the personal or the group interest they became paramount, how there was a lot of focus on the personality cult. And many times we also find that differences were on the basis of policy or from the ideological point of view, but they could have been resolved, and how the personality clash could have been avoided at different points of time, and which would not have tarnished the image of the party, which happened at many times. So we find that during this period that people, they were in a way in a situation of rivalry with each other. They had some kind of conflict between the organization men and the people, those who were in the ministry, and because of which there was a lot of intra-party conflicts, and the people, those who were not in the government, they behaved as if they were an opposition party, and they wanted that how the people, those who were in the ministry, they should not remain the ministers, and how these people, they can occupy those chairs which will be left by them. So this kind of a situation definitely would lead to an image where Congress will be seen as a party of the office seekers, that people, they were only interested in getting the seats for themselves, and they were not interested in the party work and the kind of ideals and objectives which were being talked about during the national movement, and how those objectives, those ideals, those aspirations, they were being neglected at this point of time. And some people, they have also talked about that how the ideology, which had been an important consideration in the earlier times, how it was being neglected because the vote bank politics became more important, and also at the same time the issues of social welfare and social transformation, they were also being neglected, and the role of the government or the function of the government as a social welfare body, which was to be taken seriously, it was being neglected. And we find that consequently, because of such kind of policies, that Congress lost touch with the people, and how it was no longer appealing to the intelligentsia and the younger people, and the best people, they could not be recruited in the party, because when it was not maintaining the contact with the masses, and the masses, they were not feeling any kind of appeal in the Congress. So definitely Congress will not be able to recruit those people, they will not be interested in the policies and the programs of the Congress, and when the best minds, they will not come to the Congress, then there will be some kind of a decay. And we find that during this period, many youth, those who were idealistic in nature, they joined the opposition parties, and because of which we find that Congress failed to train a new generation of leaders to replace which were those thrown up by the national movement. So it became some sort of a handicap that when more and more young people, those who are dynamic in nature, when they will join the Congress party, then only the party is going to flourish. But here opposite was happening, and the young and dynamic people, they joined other political formations, which became some sort of a loss to the Congress in the long run. And the issue of the personality cult in the Congress over a period of time, it gained more and more momentum, which was also one of the reasons for the decline of the Congress in the long run. And we find that such kind of decay, it was there in almost all the parties, but Congress being the ruling party, it was affecting the Congress more when you try to compare the kind of a situation with other political formations or parties. And we find that when the socialists, they had left the Congress, then the radical forces in the Congress, they got weakened, and the space which was vacated by the socialists, it was taken up by the vested interests like landlords, rich peasants and even princes. So the socialists, those who were there in the Congress, and how they became some sort of a force within the party in terms of providing constructive criticism with regard to the policies which were to be followed by the Congress party. And with their departure, such kind of internal criticism in the party as well also gone away. And we find that how Nehru was not a party organizer or reformer in that sense, and many old tall leaders of the Congress, they were not devoting time to the party organization, and so that became some sort of a handicap during this time. And during the years of the Nehru, the organizational work of the Congress took a beating. And we also see that how, despite differences with the political parties, the socialist or the communist, and Nehru many a times tried to bring back the socialist within the Congress fold, and he felt that it would not be good for the Congress and also for the Socialist Party if they will be in distance with each other. And socialists, on the other hand, they were critical of Nehru. They were not happy with the way the policies of the Congress they were going. And Jayprakash Narayan, for example, he wrote to Nehru in December 1948, as you can see on the screen as well, that you want to go towards socialism, but you want capitalists to help in that. Jayprakash told Nehru in March 1949, proposed legislation outlawing strikes is essential services was an ugly example of growing Indian fascism. So they were critics of the government, people like Jayprakash Narayan, who later led the JP movement against the regime of Indira Gandhi. But we find that even during the times of Nehru, Jayprakash Narayan and Nehru, they held cordial relations, but over a period of time their relations they also deteriorated. And Jayprakash, he felt that Congress party wanted to achieve socialism, but they wanted capitalists to help in that. So that was not the right kind of a policy. And he also in a way criticized Nehru in terms of outlawing the strikes in the essential services, and he communicated that it was some sort of a situation where it would be seen as a fascism. And Nehru, on the other hand, he felt that the socialists, they continue to show an amazing lack of responsibility and constructive bent of mind, and they seem to be all frustrated and going mentally to pieces. And Nehru, he was now feeling that the socialists, they did not have any kind of a responsibility, and they were not constructive at all, and how they were in a way frustrated, and they were divided on that issue. And on the other hand, we find that how Jayprakash Narayan, he was publicly denouncing Nehru's naked open fascism, and declared that his government was following faithfully in the footsteps of Hitler in their dealings with labor. So such kind of ideas where exchange was taking place between the leaders. And we also find that Nehru wanted Jayprakash to join the cabinet, but in the long run, but in 1957 also he attempted, but Jayprakash wanted the Congress to adopt a radical program which was framed by him before he and the socialists, they joined the program. And his 14-point program, it included specific constitutional amendments, administrative and land reforms, and nationalization of banks, insurance and mines. And Nehru was in a way was agreement with the 14 points of Jayprakash, but he did not want any kind of a prior agreement should be there. And we find that both of them, they had their own differences over a period of time, and their relations in a way deteriorated because of this. And we also find that how the 5-year plans, they also played an important role in terms of the idea of the socialist pattern of the society. And they were talking in the context of the equality of opportunity, and how people can get a good life, and the issue of equality and removal of disparities. And the second and the third 5-year plans, they were also in a way focusing on these kinds of aspects. And we find that when you talk about the criticism of the party, though party was trying to incorporate the socialist pattern of society, but at the same time we find that the Congress party was decaying, and there were internal divisions in the party, and the party was also in a way criticized by the opposition, that they were not able to stop the rot which was happening in the Congress party. And it was also felt that the new leaders or new leadership was not coming at the forefront, and old leaders, they had grown jaded, and the party was beginning to be weakened in a period of time. And the party was also in the government for too long, and many of them, they hungered for the official positions, influences, and the patronage. And we also find some kind of an administrative corruption as well, and how Congress was drifting away from it. And thereafter Kamraj plan was introduced, by which the leaders of the Congress in the different those who were at the administrative or the ministerial positions, like the chief ministers and the cabinet ministers, and many of them, they resigned because of the Kamraj plan, and their resignations, they were accepted by Nehru. And even then we did not find that this kind of where the party could be re-energized, that could not take place, and party continued to sink over a period of time. So now I'd like to end the discussion with this aspect, that Congress definitely played an important role during the national movement, but thereafter we find that because of the fighting for the ministerial berths, and because of the personality cult within the Congress, and the kind of differences on the ideological and the policy issues, we find there was a decay in the Congress. Thank you so much.